Hey everybody, Andrew Hogue here, your security, privacy, and forensics expert with your weekly digest of mobile security and privacy news. Each digest will contain the past week of briefings so you can quickly catch up on all the important topics in mobile security and privacy. If you have any topics you'd like me to cover in the future, just drop me a comment below. I hope you find this weekly digest useful, and thanks so much for watching. On March 2nd, the FTC issued a press release detailing the settlement with BetterHelp and requiring them to pay $7.8 million for sharing mental health data without consent. BetterHelp collected this information through their mobile app, which has over 1 million downloads on Google Play, and through their website. And the types of information they collected included your email address, your IP address, and most importantly, that really sensitive mental health questionnaire data, which they then handed over to Facebook, Snapchat, Pinterest, and other advertising companies. You can take a look at the FTC's press release out on their website, and if you're interested, you can actually see the full complaint against them. One of the things I want to point out is that BetterHelp actually operates under a number of different names. So if you're curious whether or not you or somebody you care about has been impacted by this, don't just look for BetterHelp, but you have companies like My Therapist, Teen Consulting, Faithful Consulting, Pride Consulting, and more. And what I really find so upsetting about this is you take people when they're at their most sensitive time, you tell them you're not going to share your information, and then you literally turn around and share it to the very company that you'd never really wanted to be shared with absolutely no restrictions. Like so many companies out there caught doing things like this, they have the tired response of no admission of wrongdoing. And what I really dislike the most about BetterHelp's response to the FTC settlement is they come out and say that they've never shared information like member's name and clinical data from therapy sessions with any sort of third-party advertisers. And that's actually not what they were accused of. They were accused of sharing your email address and your sensitive mental health data from the questionnaire. Privacy issues are persistent. They never go away, and once your information is out there, it's impossible to get back. These kinds of practices absolutely have to stop, and it's fantastic to see government agencies like the FTC, the Attorney General in California, bring suits against these companies, as well as many, many states now bringing forward privacy legislation. This kind of behavior is absolutely unacceptable, and when you specifically target teens, Christians, people in the LGBTQ+, it really feels predatory. So I'm really glad that the settlement is in place, even if there's no admission of wrongdoing. And if you've used these services, I'd really think hard about maybe switching and formally requesting them to delete your information. Sophos XOps released some great research on fraudulent trading apps in the Apple and Google app stores. What really caught my interest, though, was how did these apps get past the review process at both Apple and Google? Now, as a mobile security researcher, I've known for a long time that the review processes at both Apple and Google can catch some issues, but they're not intended to catch all privacy and security issues. And it can be even more challenging to detect fraudulent apps. So how did the malicious actors get around the review process? Well, what's interesting is many apps load their interfaces through a back-end service, and those back-end services are dynamic. Most apps require this because there's always information that's changing, so it can't be built into the mobile app. It has to exist on the back-end server. The malicious actor developed the app and submitted it for approval with Apple and Google. After the app was approved, they were able to swap out the back-end and then swap in their fraudulent trading interface. You can get a sense for what these look like on the Sophos blog, and also an overview of their overall operations. These were pretty sophisticated attacks, including building long-term relationships with their target, folks handling communications, finance organizations, front desk, logistics, all the way up to the folks at the top of the organization. So the question is what can Apple and Google do about this? I think if they tried to remove dynamic loading of content, pretty much the entire deck of cards would fall apart. Just too many legitimate apps require this. Of course, they could be more rigorous in their app vetting, but that doesn't really handle the problem around a fraudulent app swapping out the back end. I think one of the most intriguing ideas is the notion of continuous vetting. Full disclosure, I'm the co-founder at NowSecure, but we spent the last decade building continuous scanning capabilities, and so it's certainly possible, and we're a relatively small organization compared to Apple and Google. They make billions and billions of dollars, and perhaps if trust gets further eroded and more victims are impacted, this will be a step that has to be considered by Apple and Google. In late January, Apple released a security update for an ancient version of iOS, version 12.5.7. I suspect a lot of security teams aren't really focused on these ancient versions of iOS. This one is over 4 major releases old. But as an attacker, I'm sure it's a very interesting target. My suggestion is that folks routinely go out and take a look at the Apple security updates. Apple posts updates for all of their operating systems, so you can always come in here and get a quick view of what's going on. You can see whether or not an update has no published CVEs, and then it's pretty easy to spot that 12.5.7 really stands out here. When you go into any one of these security updates, you'll get the full view of what was patched. So in this particular one, you can see what devices it's available for, what the impact is, the description, even the CVE. But oftentimes you won't have that CVE publicly available and know what the actual score is. In this instance, it is out there, and so it's rated as an 8.8 high. And one of the other things I really look for is a little note that Apple will put in saying that they're aware that this is being actively exploited. So here we can see that if there's a version of iOS before 15.1, they've actually seen this exploited. So if you have an iOS device that's running an old version, certainly go update it. But I think for folks that manage security at large enterprises, don't ignore the old versions. It's quite possible that your organization has older devices that people just haven't thought to update. And that might just be the path that the attacker needs to get into your organization and move laterally and go after all of those assets that you're trying so hard to protect. If you're in the market for a new Android device and you value your privacy, probably don't want to purchase one from China. Researchers from the University of Edinburgh and Trinity College Dublin recently tested 3 Android devices purchased in China, and they found that those devices have 3 to 4 times as many pre-installed third-party apps, and that those apps have 8 to 10 times as many permissions as devices that you would find normally in Europe or other countries. And of course, with those permissions and access to the network, it's probably not shocking that an enormous amount of personal information is exfilled off of those devices. You can see a list here from the research paper, including IMEI, call history, contact information, GPS coordinates, and more. The Register provides a great summary of the article, and if you're interested in the actual paper itself, you can go out to the archive website and get the summary, but also full access to the paper itself. And most folks probably won't find this shocking because China regularly tops the list of the most surveilled countries in the world. So I spend a lot of time thinking about and working on mobile security and privacy, and most of the time I tend to be US-centric or perhaps thinking about the European Union. But as you look more broadly across the world population, there are billions of people that live in China, India, and other countries, and a lot of the things that I tend to take for granted here aren't necessarily true around the world. So this is a really important thing for us to keep in mind as mobile devices increasingly become the primary device that we use to interact, to manage our lives, and collect so much sensitive data.